French depth chart for 2023, folks. France are the hosts. They're the favourites. How much depth have they got for this Rugby World Cup under Fabien Galthie? How's he gone about managing his players across this Rugby World Cup cycle? We're going to go through position by position to see how the depth is looking. Where are they looking particularly strong? Where are they deep? Where are they kind of reliant on one man? And where are they perhaps looking, like they've got multiple guys who could steer the ship? We'll go through each one. You guys can let us know your thoughts. We've already had a look at a few of the squads. Some of them are really messy, especially the countries which changed coaches, the likes of Wales, Australia, and England are particularly messy. Keeping in mind they have Lions tours to deal with the Welsh and the English. And then some of them are pretty stable. The Irish one, which I haven't done yet, is looking to be pretty stable. The South Africans have been pretty stable. Feel free to check them out in comparison. But for the French, Fabien Galthie has taken a little bit of a different tack in that he has his kind of core squad like the Irish do. However, in the kind of mid-year tests, he's tended to send more of the fringe players abroad. Some of the kind of key guys needed a bit of a rest and they would stay in France over the Northern Hemisphere summer, which meant they were able to build a little bit of depth, but also means that you kind of break a little bit of that continuity. But we'll see how it goes. If looking at the actual squad, of all the minutes that were allocated across all the players across this World Cup cycle, each block of one particular colour is a player and how much time they got in the position. So you can look at some of the positions like 7, 8, 9, and then also 14. So the a couple of the loosies, the halfback and the right winger, have all had kind of 60% plus of the game time. That's the likes of Olivon, Aldrit, Dupont, and Pernod. If you're looking for four kind of key guys in the squad for France, those guys have been ever present in their position, absolutely dominating the game time. If you're looking for depth to be healthy, meaning you've got around about half of the game time for your leading candidate and then still sizable enough chunks for the backups that they've had enough game time to still be able to step up. Some of the positions like the midfield, I think 12 and 13, they look pretty healthy. First choice, second choice, third choice, green, blue, yellow. They look, kind of sizable enough. Fullback has almost been more of an even share between the first three guys. Not quite, obviously, but it's been a bit of a mix. And then the kind of messiest ones, if you want to call it messy, the left wings had a few guys, and there's been quite a few guys who've had a go in the second row, remembering that some guys double up across different positions. But what we really need to do is take out the minutes of the guys who aren't going to the World Cup and then see what is left. If we start with the front row, 1 and 2, Loosehead and Hooker, look pretty good, I think. Tight head is one that's a little bit messier. Cyril Bay on the Loosehead side is there with just under half the game time. Remembering he goes into the World Cup with an injury, but he's supposed to be able to come right before the end of the thing. Jean-Baptiste Gros is there in blue, so he's the second guy who's had over a quarter of the game time, which is nice and healthy. And then Red Awardi has got a decent chunk there in yellow. For the hookers, it's Marchand there with just over half the game time. It's Movaka with around about a quarter, and then Bougarit would have liked a little bit more, but he's still there with that decent enough little yellow slice. Those are pretty similar, aren't they? Like 1 and 2, but then 3 is the one that's quite different. Antonio there at 3 has been the kind of first choice guy from maybe 2022, 2023, but he wasn't earlier on in the cycle. That was more like Hawass and Bamba. Bamba and Hawass both missed the squad. Hawass off the field stuff. Bamba had an injury right before the World Cup, but he is in the kind of standby squad, I believe. So what you're left with is Antonio there with around about a third, just under Falatea and Aldegheri. So tight head is one that in terms of the World Cup cycle guys getting game time, it's kind of more of a late emergence of Antonio as the kind of premier guy. You can't control the off-the-field stuff if you're Fabien Galthie with Hawass. And then Bamba's injury kind of came at an unfortunate time. The other guys who've missed out in terms of like the loose head and hooker, like Camille Shah, he, started off the cycle getting some game time, but fell off the pace. Barlow, Poirot on the loose head, Danny Puiso. But yeah, for the most part, the 3 first choice guys by Marchand and Antonio have all had decent chunks of the minutes. So I still think as the first line, they are looking pretty tough. Locks is a little bit more chopping and changing. So if you're looking for number 4 and 5, 5 is the one where you've generally got your big unit, the likes of a Paul Willemse, he's there in green, and Roman Talfafanua, he's there in blue. Those are your big guys. And then your skills guys, usually number 4, that's like a Cameron Wilkie in green, and Thibaut Flamont there in blue. However, they do interchange them every now and again. So the yellow one there at number 5 is also Flamont. Sometimes they play Flamont and Wilkie in a kind of duo together, and Talfafanua is also there in yellow on the other side. So they can chop and change, but they generally have their kind of preferred roles. So it's mainly those 4 guys who are going to be locking the scrum for France, and I think that's a nice balance. Big guy, skills guy, and then if they go 6-2 split, they can even play all 4 of them in the same squad. Some of the guys who've missed out, Bernard Leroux, started the kind of French campaign in this World Cup cycle 2020, 2021 as a bit of an ever-present figure. Gerassi came in for a little while and was getting some decent game time, but he's kind of fallen off. Chalareau was your kind of big unit guy who was a surprising guy to bring into the squad given he's in his 30s to be getting his first test caps, but he fills that role of the big man. Jean Mays also got some game time. Passanti, Verag. There's been a few guys who've been there or thereabouts, but the 4 leading candidates are still there for France. So the amount of missing game time is mostly in Bernard Leroux, who's had injury troubles and probably didn't help his chances. Loose forwards, really interesting with how much game time Olivon and Aldrit have had. At 7, Olivon, like 60% of the game time. And remember, he spent some time injured as well, and he's still got that much game time. He's one of the few guys that doesn't seem to move around that much. He's pretty much always got a lock on that right flank position. Remember, they don't tend to chop and change open side, blind side, the French. They just like to go right and left. Olivon is the right flanker. And most of the time when he's been fit, he's been playing. He did lose the captaincy to Dupont while he was injured, but still tends to be, if he's available, he's playing. Francois Cross is there in blue at number 7, followed by a few kind of bit part players, the likes of Gelon, Wilkie, Makalou, Boudon. All these guys have kind of come in and filled in that position from time to time, but it's mainly Olivon's job, and that's not a bad thing because that dude is class. At number 8, it's Aldrit with even more game time. No player in any one position has had more time than Aldrit has had at number 8 for France, of all the French players. There have been other guys in other squads who have had more game time than that, but we're talking like almost 70% of the game time has been Greg Aldrit. And why not? The guy's world class. He's got a huge work rate. Very, very busy at number 8. Gillon is there in blue. Remember, Aldrit didn't go on that tour to Australia, and I don't think he went on the tour to Japan. But, Gillon has kind of been a bit of a jack of all trades, to be honest. He can fill in anywhere in the back row and do it pretty well, which is part of the reason Galthie likes him so much and sticks with him through his injury right before the World Cup, like earlier this year, long-term injury. Makalou, Kroos, and Malvaka have also had a bit of game time there at number 8, but it's largely Olivon and Aldrit, very consistent. The left flank is a little bit more changeable with Gillon there on the left with about a third of the game time. And remember, I've mentioned his name 3 times now, so if you're adding up Gillon between 6, 7, and 8, he's had plus half of the game time, more than half of the game time. So he has been very reliable and, as I said, can fill in pretty much anywhere. Kroos is there, Wilkie, Makalou, Boudon. All these guys have had a go at number 6. It's certainly a lot less consistent, but it's still mainly the same names that we already talked about in the other positions. Some of the guys that missed out, the number 1 guy is Creton. He's missed out after getting seemingly quite a lot of game time. You'd think he's going to be the next guy to fill in if anything were to happen to the existing guys. Number 8, Tonga, had a bit of a go. He went on the Japan tour, filled in at number 8. Diallo also had a go. Tolofua. There have been other guys as well. But looking at the amount of grey on each of the top of those columns, the French back row, the big guns are all going to the World Cup, which is pretty pleasing. If we get into the backs, we see the number 1 position where the game time has gone missing, sadly, and that's at number 10. You can see that grey bar is the longest one we have in any French position because that is Romain Ntamack being injured. He has had just over half of the game time for France in this World Cup cycle, so his injury is certainly devastating. You can see the importance that he would have had. The vast majority of that grey bar is Romain Ntamack. What you are left with is Jalibert there in green. He's had just over a third of the game time. And remember, he was the first choice 10. What campaign was it? 2021? Six Nations, when Intermarque's injured. He comes back only for the end of the campaign, really. So Jalibert has been the captain of the ship for a while, if I can put it that way, when Intermarque's injured. So certainly your second choice guy is not without a decent chunk of game time. So that's at least the kind of bright side, is that Jalibert's not coming into this competition with no game time. He's had a genuinely good go. Astoy there in blue, much less so. And then you're looking at Ramos in yellow, not really playing 10 as a regular thing. So Jalibert, I think at this point, becomes a crucial guy to keep fit, because otherwise you are genuinely operating with a lot less experience in the number 10 channel. Carbonell is another guy who also features in the grey, who didn't make the World Cup. He's had a small chunk of game time, a little bit more than Astoy actually, but he's kind of fallen down in the pecking order. Number 9, that huge green chunk, is Antoine Dupont. He's had a very similar amount of game time to Greg Aldrit. If he's playing, if he's fit, he's playing, isn't he? And often he plays the whole game. If things are close, they often don't even take him off. If things are, beyond a couple of scores, he will often get a rest. How often does he get man of the match? He's a generational talent. If France are going to win a World Cup, you feel like he's going to have a game-winning play in him somewhere in some kind of close game. Antoine Dupont, massive, massive contributor. He's the captain. Kuyu is there in blue, and Luku is there in yellow. So the backups haven't had that much game time, but ultimately they don't need to, because Dupont's just so dominant. Now, he's not a guy you would like to get injured, obviously. He reminds me kind of Dan Carter 2011, not because he's going to get injured. I hope he doesn't get injured, but just clear one of the world's best players in his position and at home World Cup. So fingers crossed he doesn't have the same fate to him. But man, he's important for that French team. Some of the guys who've also had a turn, Serrand didn't make the squad, Bézi, Ribéren, and Legarac sat on the bench once and didn't get off it. So yeah, that's the 9-10 situation for France. The Intermarque one is still pretty depressing. But like I said, Jalibert's had a bit of decent game time. 12 and 13, I think, looked pretty healthy. 12, Dante there with just under half of the game time. Moefana, Ficou, Vincent also had a bit of game time at 12. So it's a little bit of a mix. 13, there's very little non-game time going to the World Cup. It's pretty much Intermarque when he's shifted out to 12. 13, the main guy you're missing is Vakatawa, who had to pull out of international rugby basically with a health condition. So Ficou, green, Vincent, blue, and he's only come back into the French squad in relatively recent times after being injured for such a long period. And then Moefana and Penaud kind of in a pinch. But yeah, Vakatawa's missing time is an unfortunate one, but that's one that's totally beyond the coach's control. Some other guys have had a try. Gaetan in recent times had a go. Barassi had a go. Barak had a go. But yeah, Ficou and Vincent are the two leading guys there, minus Vakatawa, basically. Outside backs, also the leading candidates are pretty much ever present, although they have had a few guys fill in on the wings who've not made it through. Left wing, Villiers is there with just over a third of the game time. Remember, he's another one who spent a decent amount of game time injured, but is now back in the squad. Ficou, interestingly, is there in blue on the left wing. I think that was 2020. He started a couple of games out on the left wing, but he's obviously moved more to the midfield now. Moefana has been known to go out onto the wing. Penaud, occasionally on the left wing. Makalu, occasionally on the left wing. The main guys who missed out are often Ethan Dumotier, Vincent Rates, who played in 2020 and kind of fell off the pace, and then Mathis Lebel is another one who didn't make it. So there's been a few guys who've come in and then out while Villiers was away, but when Villiers back, seems to be the preferred guy, and you can see why, based on how he performed against Australia the other day. He's a pocket rocket. And then Penaud there, more than 60% of the game time, and remember, he fills in occasionally in other positions as well. If he's playing, he's going to be fit. Maybe a little bit concerningly, none of the backup guys to Penaud have had a lot of game time. Biarre, he's one of the more recent guys. He's a genuine kind of bolter into the French squad. The French squad's pretty stable, but Biarre being in there is yeah, his was, I don't want to say unexpected, but he came from outside the squad into it in a hurry. Makalu's had some game time there. Moefana's had some game time there, but yeah, it's mostly Penaud. Teddy Toma was the right winger of choice for a while. He had more than 20% of the game time. He's dropped out. Raka was there for a while. He's dropped out. But yeah, those are the main guys there. And then fullback, the main two guys are Jaminet and Ramos. They're in green and blue. The main guy who misses out is Brice Dulon, who did play the other day but doesn't make the squad. Dulon had a good kind of like just under around about a quarter of the game time. And then also Boutier was the first choice guy for a little while with that big boot of his back in 2020. But he's been not favoured for a while. Max Springs also had a go. BLBRA can fit in if needs be. Likewise, Jalibert has done so in the past in a pinch. But between Jaminet and Ramos, I think you would say they are pretty well covered. So by my count, all up, the French have used 69 players, which is actually not that many, seeing as they often sent the kind of fringe guys on tours like to Australia and to Japan. I thought like it would have been a bit more. But there's no real guys who were in their position for 3 years under Galthie and then have just been kind of cut from the squad. There's no Michael Hooper situation with this French squad. It's a lot more stable. The main guys who you're looking for, the emissions, and it's not even really an omission by choice. It is the likes of Intermac with more than half the game time. It is Vakatawa with his kind of quarter of the game time. Teddy Toma is one that genuinely just got surpassed by other players. His game time was not insignificant. Brice Dulon as well. And then probably Bernard Leroux would be the other guy. Oh, and I suppose the two tight head props, Hawas and Bamba, for different reasons. But yeah. Now, interestingly, when you look at the kind of top 15 players, virtually every first choice guy is on his way to the World Cup. Bai, Marchand, Antonio are all the leading candidates in their position. Likewise, Woki and Willemse, that would be your second row. Back row would be Gelon, Olivon, and Aldrit. We'll have to wait and see when Gelon is available, seeing as he's still recovering from injury. You feel like it might be close, but Gelon will make an appearance at some point. 9-10 is Dupont and Jalibert. That's the only position where the first choice guy is not selected, and again, that's injury, and that's Intermark. Midfield, Danty and Fiku. Outside backs, Villiers, Penaud, and Jaminet. Looks like a pretty bloody good team. I think if you were picking a team just off the top of your head, it would probably be pretty much all the names that I mentioned. Not many of the fringe guys, I think, have gotten in a position to quite surpass their leading candidates in position. Fixtures-wise, New Zealand first up, followed by Uruguay, Namibia, and Italy. So they kind of bookend it with their two toughest games. If they beat the All Blacks, they should, by all accounts, go through top of the pool, unless one of the other three teams can perform a miracle against the French. If they lose the first game, then there's a bit of extra spice on that final game against the Italians. But ultimately, this French side are predicted to do very well. And I think, looking at the depth chart, Galthie has had things pretty consistently good. There's no real huge surprises. I guess the inclusions of guys like BLBRA and Boudon are maybe the two closest things we would consider to bolters, but they've both got a bit of versatility to cover positions, fullback, wing, back row, and midfield. So if you want to check out the other depth charts, remember we've already looked at the All Blacks, who are rivals for France in Pool A. Might be an interesting one for you to compare those. If you want to see a bloody messy one, check out the Australian one. That is all over the place. But yeah, cheers for your support, guys. Let us know your thoughts on the French squad, and I'll talk to you guys again soon. See you later.